Sign it. The pen at the table, so hard it bounced twice. A man in a $6,000 suit stood on one side. A girl in a torn waitress uniform stood on the other. Between them, a single sheet of paper, and a number so large it didn't look real. She didn't pick up the pen. He didn't move either. The room was dead silent, except for the sound of her father crying somewhere behind her. Not the kind of crying that asks for forgiveness. The ugly kind. The kind that already knows it's too late. You have 30 seconds, the man said. His voice was quiet. That was the scariest part. He didn't need to yell. She looked at the paper. She looked at the number. She looked at the door, and she knew there was no running. There was nowhere to go. The debt collectors were outside. The lights in her father's shop had already been cut off. Her little brother hadn't eaten since yesterday morning. "Who are you?" she asked. He didn't answer. "I said, who are you? Because no normal person walks in here with this much money and buys a human being like she's furniture." He tilted his head slightly. Something flickered behind his eyes. Not cruelty, not amusement. Something she couldn't name yet. Something that looked almost like recognition. "My name doesn't matter right now," he said. "What matters is that your family keeps the house. Your brother goes to school. Your father lives. All of that happens if you sign. And if I don't—" He picked the pen up off the table, held it out to her. "Then I walk out that door, and by sunrise tomorrow, everything your father built for 30 years becomes a parking lot." She stared at him for a long time. Then she took the pen. "Before we go any further, if the story already has your heart racing, do me a favor right now. Subscribe. Share this with someone who loves a story that hits different. Drop a comment and tell me, would you have signed that paper? Now let's go back, because you have no idea who this man really is. And neither does she. Her name was Clara, not a fancy name. Not the kind of name that gets remembered at fancy parties or written in gold on office doors. Just Clara. Clara Mills. A 23-year-old girl from a small town in Ohio who had been working double shifts at diner since she was 16 years old, sending every extra dollar home to keep her family above water. She had one good pair of shoes. One. And she wore them to every important occasion. Job interviews, her mother's funeral 3 years ago, and now apparently to the moment her father sold her to pay off a debt she didn't even know existed. The town was called Maywood. Population 12,000, if you were being generous. The kind of town where everybody knew your business before you did, where the grocery store owner remembered your grandmother's maiden name, and where the biggest news of the year was usually whether the high school football team made playoffs. Clara had grown up in Maywood and always told herself she would leave someday, after her brother Marcus finished school, after her father's hardware store got back on its feet, after, always after. Her father, George Mills, was not a bad man. That was the hardest part. He wasn't greedy or dishonest. He was just a man who loved his family too much and understood money too little. When the big box hardware store opened on Route 9 5 years ago, his customers disappeared almost overnight. He took out a loan to renovate, then another loan to cover the first one. Then he borrowed from people he should never have borrowed from. The kind of people who don't send reminder letters. The kind who send men in dark cars to sit outside your house at 3 in the morning. Clara had noticed the cars. She'd said nothing because she didn't want to worry Marcus, who was 12 and already too serious for his age. She'd just worked more shifts and sent more money home and told herself it would be fine. It was not fine. The man who arrived at their house on a Tuesday evening in October was not a loan shark. He didn't look like one, anyway. He arrived alone. No bodyguards, no muscle, just him, in a dark car that cost more than their house. He knocked on the door like a normal person. He accepted the glass of water her father offered him like a normal person. And then he placed a folder on their kitchen table that contained documents showing that George Mills owed $432,000 across 7 different debts, all of which had been quietly purchased. Every single one. By a single company called Aurelius Holdings. Clara had come home from her shift to find her father sitting at that table, hands folded, eyes red, the folder open in front of him like a confession. She read every page. Twice, while the man in the suit waited. Then she understood. Her father had signed something 3 years ago. Something buried in the paperwork of one of his loans. A clause. The kind of clause that small print lawyers hide and desperate people never read. It said that in the event of total default, the primary debtor could offer an alternative form of settlement. Specifically, 1 year contracted service to the holding company, performed by a family member of legal age, in lieu of cash payment. In plain English, her father had accidentally signed a paper that said if he couldn't pay, he could offer up a family member to work for them instead. It was legal, just barely, and it was real. This can't be enforceable, Clara said. It's been reviewed by 3 separate law firms. The man said, it is... You're a person, not a company. You can't own someone's labor by buying their debt. The contract specifies contracted service, not ownership. 1 year, fully compensated at market rate, housing and expenses covered. At the end of 12 months, the entire debt is cleared. Your family keeps the house. Your brother's education through college is fully funded. Your father receives medical coverage for his heart condition. Clara went very still. She looked at her father. He couldn't meet her eyes. His heart, she said quietly. How long have you known? George Mills stared at the table. Dad. Since spring, he whispered. I didn't want you to. How bad? The man in the suit answered for him. Stage 2, treatable, but the treatment costs approximately $200,000 over 18 months, which your family obviously does not have. Clara set the folder down very carefully. She was the kind of person who, when things got very bad, got very calm. It scared people sometimes. It scared her father now, because he knew what that stillness meant. It meant she had already made up her mind. Where would I be working? She asked. New York. Doing what? That will be explained when you arrive. Who is the head of Aurelius Holdings? The man paused. Just a fraction of a second. That information will also be available when you arrive. She looked at him steadily. You're not going to tell me who I'm signing myself over to. The principal prefers privacy. The principal. She repeated it like it tasted strange. And you? Who are you? My name is David Park. I'm the Director of Acquisitions for Aurelius Holdings. Director of Acquisitions. She let the silence sit. You acquire things, among other responsibilities. And today you came to acquire me. David Park didn't flinch, but something behind his eyes shifted just slightly, like a man who had a conscience and had learned to keep it very quiet. I came to present a legal option to your family. What you do with it is entirely your choice. Clara looked around the kitchen. The old yellow wallpaper her mother had picked out, the cross-stitched rooster on the wall that had always been slightly crooked, Marcus's math homework on the counter, her father's pill bottles lined up by the sink. She counted 5 of them. She hadn't known about the heart. She hadn't known. How had she not known? She picked up the pen. She signed. David Park collected the folder without ceremony. He left a business card on the table. He told her a car would come Friday morning at 7. He said to pack for a year. Then he left. The kitchen was so quiet she could hear the refrigerator humming. Her father reached for her hand. She let him take it. She didn't cry. Not yet. That would come later in the bathroom, with the water running so no one could hear. But right now she just held her father's hand and looked at the rooster on the wall and thought, 1 year, just 1 year, and then everything would be okay. She was wrong about that. Not about the 1 year part. About the everything being okay part. Because okay wasn't what was waiting for her in New York. What was waiting for her was so far beyond okay, and so far beyond terrible, and so far beyond anything she had ever imagined that the word okay would never feel like enough again. But she didn't know that yet. On Friday morning at 7, the car came. Marcus stood on the porch in his pajamas and tried very hard not to cry. He was 12, and he had decided that 12 was too old to cry, even though it absolutely was not. Clara hugged him for a long time, long enough that she could memorize the exact weight of him, the way he still smelled like the strawberry shampoo she'd bought him since he was little, the particular sound of his breathing. I'll call every day, she said. You promise? I promise. What if... Marcus... She pulled back and held his face in both hands. Look at me. What happens? He recited it back to her, their old saying, the thing she told him every time something went wrong. Hard things make us harder. And harder doesn't mean broken. It means ready. That's right. She kissed his forehead. She hugged her father. She did not look back at the house as the car pulled away because if she did she would fall apart, and she did not have that luxury today. The drive to the airport took 40 minutes. The driver was polite and silent. Clara watched Ohio roll past a window, flat land, pale sky. The kind of October morning that couldn't decide if it wanted to be beautiful or gray. At the airport, she realized she was not flying commercial. The car pulled around to a private terminal. A small white jet sat on the tarmac. Clara had never been on any kind of plane before, let alone this kind. She sat in a cream-colored leather seat and thought it probably cost more than her entire apartment building back home. David Park was not on the plane, just a flight attendant who offered her sparkling water and a menu, and treated her with the same quiet professionalism she imagined was extended to every passenger on this aircraft, regardless of whether they arrived by choice. She ordered coffee. She didn't touch the food. She looked out the window as Ohio disappeared below and thought about her mother, who had always wanted to fly and never got the chance. New York came up to the clouds like a movie. She had seen pictures. She had watched it in films. But the actual sight of Manhattan from the air, all that glass and steel and impossible verticality, that city that seemed to have decided the sky was suggestion, it took her breath away despite everything. A different car met her at the private terminal. Different driver. Same silence. Same impeccable politeness. They drove through streets she didn't know, through neighborhoods that shifted from industrial to polished to something rarefied she didn't have a word for. Eventually, the car stopped in front of a building on the Upper East Side. Not a hotel. A building. A residential tower of dark glass and stone that looked like it had been designed specifically to make ordinary people feel they were not supposed to be there. A doorman in a gray uniform opened her door before she could reach for the handle. "Ms. Mills?" "Yes." "Welcome. I'm James. Please follow me." He brought her inside through a lobby that had flowers the size of small trees. He directed her to an elevator with no buttons, just a small panel that he activated with a key card. The elevator moved upward with the kind of smooth silence that costs a lot of money. It did not stop on any of the numbered floors. It went to the top. When the doors opened, she was standing at the entrance of a penthouse apartment that took up the entire floor. Floor-to-ceiling windows on every side. The city spread below in every direction like a map of itself. The space was enormous but strangely quiet, all clean lines and neutral colors, and nothing out of place, the way very expensive rooms often look like no one actually lives in them. James led her to a sitting area near the windows. There was a tray with coffee and fruit and a note card on the table. He told her someone would be with her shortly, offered her anything else she needed, and stepped back into the elevator. She picked up the note card. It said, "Make yourself comfortable. I apologize for the short notice on specifics. I'll explain everything when we meet. A. A." She set the card down and walked to the window and looked out at New York. 50 stories below, yellow cabs moved like slow fish through concrete canyons. She could see Central Park from here, that great rectangle of trees in the middle of all that ambition. It looked small from up here. Even the trees looked small. She heard the door. She turned around. And that was the moment everything changed. He was not what she expected. That was the first thing. He was young. That was the second thing. Not a boy. A man, clearly, in the way he held himself, the way his eyes settled on her with a gravity that felt practiced and also utterly natural. But young. 27, maybe 28. She would learn later he was 29. He was tall, dark hair, cut short but not perfectly, just slightly overlong at the temples, like someone who kept forgetting to schedule a haircut or didn't care enough to remember. He was wearing a gray sweater and dark trousers, no jacket, no tie. For a man who apparently owned a jet and a penthouse and a floor's worth of sky, he looked remarkably plain, not in an unattractive way, in the way of someone who had long since stopped feeling the need to prove anything with appearances. He crossed the room toward her, extended his hand. "I'm Ashton Cole," he said, "and I want to apologize." She shook his hand. His grip was firm and brief. His eyes were steady, and a very particular shade of dark brown that she would think about later and not be able to fully explain. "Apologize for what?" she said. "For the manner in which this arrangement was presented to you, and for the fact that I wasn't there in person. That was wrong of me. You deserved to meet the person you were signing a contract with before you signed it." She studied him. "You're the principal." "Yes." "You're Aurelius Holdings, among other things." She looked around the penthouse, at the city below, back at him. "You're young," she said. Something shifted in his expression. Not offense, closer to amusement, but quieter than that. "I am." "How old are you?" 29. "And you what?" "Own a holding company." "I own several companies. Aurelius is one of them." "And you go around buying people's debts and then buying the people." He held her gaze, didn't flinch from the words. "I understand why you frame it that way, and I won't argue with it. What David presented to your family was legal, but the ethics of it are complicated. I'd like to explain my reasoning, if you'll let me." "I'm here for a year," Clara said. "I have nowhere else to be." He almost smiled. It didn't quite make it all the way. "Fair enough." He gestured toward the sitting area. "Please, sit down." She sat. He sat across from her, not beside her. She noticed that, the deliberate distance, like a man who understood the importance of physical boundaries and took them seriously. "I'll be honest with you," he said. "I don't usually do this. By people, involve myself in debt cases at the personal level. Aurelius acquires distressed debt portfolios. It's a financial mechanism. We buy the debt from original lenders at a reduced rate, then work with debtors on structured repayment or settlement. Your father's case came to my attention personally because of the alternative settlement clause in one of the original documents. The clause that let him offer up a family member. Yes, it's an archaic provision. It exists in some very old loan structures, completely unenforceable in most jurisdictions. Actually, our legal team flagged it when we acquired the portfolio." Clara felt something cold move through her. "Then why?" "Because I asked them to present it as a viable option." Silence. "Why?" Her voice was very quiet now, the still kind of quiet. He leaned forward. His hands were clasped on his knees. He looked directly at her, and she had the disorienting sense that he was choosing his words with the same care someone uses when handling something that could break. "Because I needed someone," he said. "Someone specific, not just an employee. I needed someone who couldn't be bought. Someone who wasn't already in my world, already shaped by it, already wanting something from me. Someone who would tell me the truth." She stared at him. "I don't understand." "I'm worth approximately $41 billion, he said. "Not bragging. Just stating a fact the way you'd state the weather. I have been worth that since I was 26 years old. I have 400 employees. I have advisors and attorneys and board members and friends who want things from me. Everyone in my life wants something from me. That is a reality of what I live. And it has been that way for long enough that I have lost the ability to trust my own judgment about people." He stopped, looked at his hands for a moment. "I made a mistake last year," he continued. "A serious one. I trusted the wrong person in a significant way, and it cost me, not money, that I could survive. It cost me something I can't easily replace. And after that I realized I had a problem I didn't know how to solve. I couldn't find, in my entire world, a single person I was certain was being honest with me simply because they were a good person, not because they were paid to, not because they wanted something in return." Clara was quiet for a moment. "So you went looking for someone you could buy, to find someone who couldn't be bought." He looked at her. "That's a contradiction," she said. "I know. That's actually a little sad." Something moved behind his eyes. He hadn't expected that. She could tell. He was a man who was accustomed to being analyzed for his money, his power, his decisions, not for his sadness. "I know that too," he said. "And what exactly do you need this honest person to do for a year?" He was quiet for a moment. "Observe. Attend meetings with me. Events. Business functions. Give me a perspective I don't have. Tell me when something seems wrong. Tell me when I'm being lied to. Tell me what you see. I'm a waitress from Ohio. I don't know anything about business. That's exactly why I need you. She thought about that for a while. And in exchange, she said slowly, you treat this as full debt repayment. My father's heart gets treated. Marcus goes to school. And you receive a salary, he added. Market rate for a full-time advisor position. Deposited monthly. No argument. I'm not an advisor. You'll be whatever we decide to call it. We, she repeated. He spread his hand slightly, a gesture that was almost an apology and almost an acknowledgement of the strange equality of the position. You don't have to agree with everything. That's the point. Clara looked at the city again, at Central Park down below, at the October sky pressing flat and pale against all that glass. I have one condition, she said. Tell me. You never lie to me about anything. Not what I'm walking into, not why I'm there, not who will be there. You don't use me as a prop and pretend I'm something I'm not. Whatever this is, it stays honest. He was quiet for a long moment. Agreed, he said. Then I'll need to know where I'm sleeping, because I haven't slept since Thursday. That time, the almost smile made it all the way. He showed her the guest suite. It was larger than her entire apartment back home. She stood in the middle of it in her one good pair of shoes and thought that the word guest suite was doing a lot of work when the room had its own fireplace and a bathroom with a bathtub that looked architectural. She called Marcus that night. He asked if New York was as big as it looked on TV. She told him bigger. He asked if the rich man was mean. She thought about it for a moment long enough that Marcus noticed. Clara? He's not mean, she said. I don't know what he is yet, but not mean. Good, Marcus said, with the simple certainty of a 12-year-old who had decided that was enough information. Good. She slept for 11 hours. In the morning, there was coffee already made in the kitchen, and a note from Ashton that said simply, no obligations today. Get your bearings. The city belongs to you. She went out alone into New York in her one good pair of shoes and walked for 3 hours without a plan. She walked through Central Park and watched old men playing chess. She walked down streets with shops she couldn't afford and didn't want anything from. She found a diner near Lexington Avenue that reminded her of home and ordered eggs and coffee and sat in a booth for an hour, just being Clara Mills, just being herself, in the middle of all this enormous foreign world. She thought about Ashton Cole, $41 billion, 29 years old, and what he wanted, what he had orchestrated this entire strange arrangement to get, was someone who would tell him the truth. She thought about that for a long time. By the time she walked back to the building, she had made a decision. She was going to do this. Not just go through the motions, actually do it. Actually pay attention. Actually speak up. Actually be what he said he needed. Because her father's life depended on it, and her brother's future depended on it. Yes. But also because something in her, the stubborn, clear-eyed, never backs down part of her that had kept a family together since she was 19, found that challenge deeply interesting. Ashton Cole wanted someone who couldn't be bought. Fine. She would show him what that looked like. The first event was a gala at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, 11 days after she arrived. Before that, there was shopping. Ashton's assistant, a compact, efficient woman named Priya, who communicated primarily in bullet points and moved through space like she was always 3 steps ahead of everyone else, informed Clara that the gala had a dress code and that a stylist would come to the apartment the following day. Clara said she had clothes. Priya looked at Clara's single rolling suitcase with the professionalism of someone choosing not to have an opinion. The stylist would come at 10, Priya said. The stylist's name was Renata. She was in her 50s, French, and had the energy of a woman who had dressed famous people for so long that she had lost capacity for intimidation but retained an absolute certainty about what worked. She took one look at Clara, medium height, strong shoulders, dark eyes that missed nothing, a face that was more interesting than pretty and would photograph better than beautiful, and nodded once, like a diagnosis. You know what you are? Renata said, a waitress from Ohio. You are a woman who looks like she means what she says. That is actually very rare and very useful. Come. 2 hours later, Clara had 3 evening gowns, for day dresses, shoes that fit, and were beautiful without being theatrical, and a working relationship with Renata that had evolved from formal to something closer to collaborative, because Clara had opinions and Renata respected opinions more than agreement. The night of the gala, Clara stood in front of the mirror in a deep navy dress that Renata had described as serious without being severe, and thought that she looked like someone she had never met before but might want to know. She walked out of the guest suite to find Ashton already in the living room in a dark suit, looking out at the city. He turned when he heard her, and he was quiet for a moment. One careful, genuine moment of quiet that had nothing performative in it. "You look," he stopped. "You look like yourself," he said. "Just more so." She didn't know what to do with that, so she just said, "Let's go." The Met Gala, not the Met Gala, but a benefit gala held at the museum, was everything Clara had expected and more. The kind of event where every surface was too beautiful and every conversation was too careful, where people said things like, "How lovely," and we simply must, while meaning things that had nothing to do with loveliness. Ashton moved through it with ease. Not comfort, exactly. She noticed that right away. He wasn't relaxed. He was practiced. There was a difference. He smiled and shook hands and said the right things. But there was a quality to it, like a very good actor who has played the same role so many times that the performance is technically perfect and emotionally distant. Clara stayed a step behind him and watched. She watched the way a tall, blond man named Harrison Wolfe kept maneuvering conversations to mention a development project in Charleston. She watched a woman named Diana Cross touch Ashton's arm 3 times in 20 minutes in a way that was not accidental. She watched 2 men from what she would later learn was his board of directors exchange a look behind Ashton's back when he mentioned plans for a new acquisition, a look that was quick and practiced and not friendly. On the car ride home, Ashton asked, "What did you see?" Clara told him. All of it. The Harrison Wolfe maneuvers, the Diana Cross touches, the board member look. She described each one flatly, without editorializing, the way she'd learned to give a table's order accurately. Not what she thought about it, just what she saw. He listened without interrupting. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment. "The Harrison Wolfe thing," he said. "How many times did he steer the subject back to Charleston?" 4 times in 3 different conversations. And each time, someone else joined the conversation within about 90 seconds, like they were positioned nearby. Ashton looked at her. "I notice things," she said. "I've been working in a diner for 6 years. You learn to see a table from across the room." "The men from the board," he said, described the look. The kind of look people give each other when someone says something that they already have a plan for, and they're glad the other person doesn't know yet. Long silence. "That's very specific," he said. "Am I wrong?" He looked out the window at the city going past. "No," he said quietly. "You're not wrong." The next morning Priya informed her that Ashton had pulled out of a deal he had been negotiating for 4 months. Something involving a development project in Charleston. Priya did not explain why. She just reported the information the way she reported all information, as fact, without decoration. Clara poured her coffee and thought, so that's what this is. The weeks moved. October became November. November settled into a kind of rhythm. She went to meetings with him, board presentations, strategy sessions, dinners that were really negotiations wearing the costume of social occasions. She sat to his right in a chair that was usually described to other attendees as his personal assistant, though Ashton never used that title himself. When people asked, he said Clara was an advisor. When they pushed, he said she helped him see things clearly. When they pushed further, he would look at them with that particular look of his. Not cold exactly, more like a door gently but firmly closing, and the subject would change. She told him what she saw, every time, without softening it. He paid attention every time, not just politely. Actually, there were things she got wrong. She told him, so when she realized it, which he said was something that was becoming slowly more like warmth, was more valuable than getting things right. Anyone can tell me they were right. He said one evening over takeout at the kitchen island, because they had discovered around week 3 that both of them preferred Chinese takeout at the kitchen counter to elaborate meals in the dining room. Nobody tells me when they were wrong. It's the most useless thing about being who I am. Everyone around me is always right up until the moment it turns out they've been lying for months. What happened? she said. The person you trusted. Last year, he was quiet for a moment. He set down his chopsticks. My CFO, he said. Man named Garrett. I'd known him for 5 years. I considered him a friend. He was redirecting funds from a series of our smaller acquisitions. Not enough to show up clearly on standard audits. Spread across enough transactions that it looked like normal variance. He took about $12 million over 18 months. How did you find out? An anonymous tip, not from anyone in the company, from someone outside. And the $12 million. I didn't care about the money, he said, flat and honest. $12 million is a bad month on paper, not a catastrophe. What I couldn't survive was realizing that I hadn't seen it, that I'd been sitting across from someone for 5 years and had no idea. He picked up his chopsticks again. I built everything I have on the ability to read situations, to see what's real, and I missed something that big, that close. He paused. It shook something loose in me that I haven't been able to put back. Clara was quiet for a moment. Garrett was your friend, she said. You trusted him because of that. That's not a failure to read situations. That's a human being extending trust to another human being. He looked at her. You can't protect yourself against love by getting better at reading people, she said. That's not how it works. Long silence. Where does a waitress from Ohio get philosophy like that? He said. The same place everyone does, she said. From losing things. He looked at her for a long moment, and something in his expression shifted. Not dramatically, not like a scene in a movie, but the way light shifts in a room when a window is open somewhere, a small change of pressure that changes everything's quality. He looked away first. More dumplings, he said. Obviously, she said. December arrived in New York the way it does. Not gradually, but all at once. Christmas lights appeared overnight on Fifth Avenue, like someone had given a signal. The air became sharp and smelled like roasted chestnuts and diesel, and something sweet from the pretzel carts. Clara called Marcus every day. He was doing well in school, better than well. He'd joined the math team. He'd talk about a teacher who was also teaching him chess. He sounded, for the first time in years, like a kid, like an actual 12-year-old kid with normal things to be interested in, not a small person carrying adult worry. Her father had started treatment. It was hard, and it was expensive, and it was working. He called her every Sunday. The calls were quiet in the way of people who have said something irreversible and are finding their way back to each other around it. She loved him. She had never stopped. That was the strange thing about being sold by someone who loves you. It doesn't make the love disappear. It makes it more complicated, more honest. She and Ashton had settled into something. She wouldn't have called it friendship yet. Not exactly. It was something more careful than that, more deliberate, like two people who recognize something important in each other and are being very gentle with it, because they both learned what it costs to be wrong about people. He told her things. Not everything, not all at once, but things. He told her about growing up in Connecticut, in a house that had too much money and not enough warmth, a father who measured success in net worth and never found a number large enough to satisfy him, a mother who had spent Clara's entire lifetime very quietly checking out her own life in a way no one discussed openly. He told her that he had built his first company at 19, sold it at 22, built the next one at 23, and by 26 had been worth more money than most people could meaningfully imagine, and that at no point in that process had he had time to figure out who he was outside of what he could build. He told her these things the way people tell things they've never said out loud before, carefully, a little at a time, watching to see if it was safe. She told him things too. Not as easily. She was more private by nature, or maybe by necessity, but she told him about her mother, about the last year of her mother's life, when Clara had been 19 and had quietly restructured her entire existence around keeping the family going without making it obvious that was what she was doing. She told him about the dreams she'd had before that. She had wanted to study journalism, had written for her high school paper, and been told by a teacher who meant it that she had a gift. She told him these things without bitterness, which he seemed to find unusual. You're not angry, he said once, about what you gave up. I made choices, she said. I don't have to be angry about them to wish they'd been different. That's a remarkable way to live. It's a survival skill, she said. Anger takes energy. I needed my energy. But here's where I have to tell you what Clara wasn't saying, what she was noticing but refusing to name, because she was a practical woman, a grounded woman, a woman who knew exactly what situation she was in and had absolutely no intention of being a foolish person about it. She was noticing him, not in a vague way, in the specific, particular, quiet devastation of noticing someone who keeps surprising you, the way he asks questions, and then actually listen to the answers instead of already preparing his next point, the way he was, underneath all the precision and control and $41 billion gravity, genuinely funny when he let himself be, a dry, quick wit that surfaced most reliably when they were alone and he had stopped performing, the way he was with the building staff, not performatively kind, not doing for show, but actually knowing James, the doorman's wife's name, and asking how her hip surgery went, the way she had noticed once and then could never unnotice that he kept a photograph on his desk that he'd turn face down and would sometimes, when he thought no one was watching, turn face up and look at for a moment before turning back down again. She never asked about the photograph. She was practical. She had a contract. She was here for 11 more months. She did not have the luxury of feelings. And then came the company Christmas party. Ashton held it at the penthouse. About 60 people. Senior staff, close associates, a few others. Priya coordinated it with the same tactical efficiency she brought to all things. The apartment, which Clara had by now come to think of as a beautiful but slightly sad place, too perfect, not enough mess, not enough evidence of anyone truly living in it, was transformed for the evening into something that felt almost like warmth. Clara wore a dark red dress that Renata had selected 2 weeks before with a specificity that felt like prophecy. The party was fine. She circulated. She talked to people. She did the things one does. People were curious about her. She had become a known quantity in Ashton's orbit by this point, present enough at enough functions that she registered on people's radar, mysterious enough that she generated particular social energy of an unanswered question. And then a woman arrived 2 hours into the party, who changed the temperature of the room. Her name was Simone Voss. Clara would learn this after, when she asked Priya directly, but she knew before she learned the name that this person mattered, because of the way Ashton's face did something that it never did, lost its practiced calm for exactly 1 second, then recovered it so quickly that most people wouldn't have caught it. Clara caught it. Simone Voss was 32, beautiful in the specific way of someone who had been beautiful their whole life, and wore it like a well-fitted coat. Not trying, not concerned, simply present in their own attractiveness. She moved through the party with the ease of someone who had been in this apartment before, many times. She came to Ashton and kissed him on the cheek. He said something low, near her ear. She laughed. Her hand stayed on his arm for a moment after. Clara found herself near the window, looking at the city, with a feeling she refused to identify. Later, an hour later, she was in the kitchen getting water, when Simone appeared in the doorway. "You're Clara," Simone said. "I am. Ashton speaks about you." She leaned against the doorframe. Direct, assessing, not unfriendly exactly, but not casual either. "He says you're the only honest person in his life. I'm not sure that's a compliment to everyone else." Simone smiled. It reached her eyes, but not all the way. "It's not. How are you finding New York? Bigger than Ohio." Simone tilted her head slightly. "How long are you here for?" "Through next October. And then I go home." Simone studied her for a moment. "Do you know about Garrett?" "The CFO?" "Yes." "Do you know about me and Garrett?" Clara held her gaze. "No." Simone was quiet for a moment. Then, "I was the anonymous tip. I was the one who told Ashton what Garrett was doing." She paused. "Because Garrett had also been involved with me, before I knew who he really was. And when I found out, I had to choose between protecting myself and protecting Ashton." She picked up a water glass on the counter, looked at it, didn't drink from it. "I chose Ashton, and I lost something for it." "What did you lose?" Simone set the glass down. "More than I expected." She looked at Clara steadily. "Take care of him. He's harder to hurt than he looks and easier than he knows." Then she was gone, back into the party, and Clara stood in the kitchen alone for a moment and thought about what harder to hurt than he looks and easier than he knows meant when you applied it to a specific man at a specific party. And she pushed the thought all the way down the bottom of her chest and left it there. She went back to the party. She did not look at Ashton for the rest of the evening. New Year's Eve, they watched the ball drop from the roof of the building. Priya had organized a small gathering. 12 people, heaters, champagne. Clara stood at the edge of the roof with a glass she hadn't drunk from and watched the fireworks break over the city. Ashton came to stand beside her. "How are you?" he said. Not the social version. The actual question. "Thinking about my brother," she said. "Last New Year's, I made him stay up till midnight, and we watched it on a 12-inch TV and ate cheese crackers because it was all we had." She paused. He thought it was the best New Year's he'd ever had. Ashton was quiet. "He called today," she said. "He said his teacher told him he's the best chess player in the school. He was trying very hard not to sound too proud of it." "Was he?" "Deeply." "Good," Ashton said. Something in his voice was soft. Genuinely. He should be. The countdown started around them. 10, 9, 8. She could hear from the street 50 stories below. Could feel in the cold air, in the vibration of 1,000,000 people all holding the same breath. 3, 2, 1. The city exploded in light, and Clara turned and found that Ashton was already looking at her, not at the fireworks. At her. There was a moment, just a moment, where the whole city existed outside of them. And inside that moment there was only the question of what would happen next. The most human question. The most ancient. She looked away first this time. "Happy New Year," she said. "Happy New Year," he said. He sounded like a man standing at the edge of something high and deciding, carefully, not to jump. Not tonight. January. February. She learned that he read voraciously everything, in no particular order, history and physics and novels and architectural theory. Books stacked on every surface, dog-eared and annotated. She learned that he was a terrible cook, but a good baker, which she found inexplicably funny. She learned that he had never learned to drive because he'd gone from Connecticut directly to the city at 18, and saw no reason to learn, and that this was one of several ways in which his extraordinary wealth had created ordinary blind spots. She taught him to drive in a parking garage in White Plains on a Saturday in February, because she said it was absurd and he should know how. He was terrible at it, and she laughed for the first time in a real, unreserved, full-volume way that surprised them both. He said later it was the best sound he'd heard in years. She didn't know he'd said it. He said it to Priya, who said it to James, who said it to his wife, and somehow it got back to Clara 3 weeks later through the strange underground telegraph of household staff. And she stood in the elevator going up to the penthouse and felt something move through her chest like a fault line shifting. "Stop it," she told herself. "You have a contract. You have a brother who needs you to keep it together. You are here for 1 year, and then you go home. Stop it." March brought a crisis. A journalist named Preston Webb published a piece in a financial magazine suggesting that Aurelius Holdings had been using predatory loan practices to acquire debt from vulnerable small businesses, specifically targeting communities of color in the Midwest and South, buying their loans, calling them early, and converting the businesses to commercial real estate. The article named 6 specific cases. Clara read it on a Tuesday morning and felt the ground shift under her feet. Not because she was surprised that such things happened, but because one of the cases described sounded, structurally, procedurally, in every specific detail, exactly like what had happened to her father. She went to find Ashton. He was already in his office with Priya and 2 lawyers, the article open on his tablet. His expression in particular closed, control kind he wore when something had genuinely gotten under his armor. She waited until the lawyers left. Then she walked in and said, "Is it true?" He looked at her. "The article. Is any of it true?" Long pause. "The practices described are practices that existed in the portfolio we acquired, before we acquired it. The original lender. Did Aurelius Holdings continue those practices after acquisition?" He held her gaze. "In 2 of the 6 cases, the timeline. Yes or no, Ashton?" Silence. "In 2 cases," he said, "the processes had been initiated before our acquisition were allowed to continue without sufficient review of their ethical standing." "Yes." She absorbed that. And my father, she said, was that case also. No, this time immediate. Absolute. Your father's case was flagged specifically because of that clause. It came to me directly because one of our reviewers put on the desk instead of the automated system. That's the only reason it got to me at all. He paused. If it had gone through automated processing, it would have been foreclosed. The house would already be gone. So you saved my father's house, she said, in a manner of speaking. After your company helped create the conditions that threatened it. He was very still. Yes, he said. She walked to the window. The March sky was low and pale, the city below stripped of February's last snow, and not yet wearing spring. What are you going to do about it? She said. The legal team is preparing a response. I'm not asking about the legal response. I'm asking what you're going to do. She turned around. He was watching her. You have enough money to fix this, she said. Not just legally. Actually fix it. Reach out to every business in those 6 cases. Find out who was actually harmed. Compensate them. Change the review protocols. Hire someone whose entire job is ethical oversight of acquisition practices. She paused. And don't do it because of the article. Do it because it's right. The silence was long. You know, he said slowly, most advisors will be telling me how to minimize press damage right now. I'm not most advisors. No, he said, you're not. He did it. All of it. Within 6 weeks, Aurelius Holdings had reached direct settlements with all 6 businesses. The ethical oversight position was created and filled. The story came out, not as a defensive measure, but as an actual announcement, an acknowledgement of what had happened, and a commitment to how things would change. The financial press called it either admirable or strategically brilliant, depending on which publication you read. Clara thought it was neither. She thought it was just right, and she thought that was more interesting than admirable. She also noticed, in those 6 weeks, a change in him. Something that had been held at a careful distance began to come closer. Not in anything he said or did. Ashton Cole was not a man who made declarations or grand gestures, but in small things. In the way he waited for her opinion before meetings now, not after. In the way he would fall quiet in a conversation and look at her in a particular way that had nothing to do with business. In the way he had started, without comment, to leave a coffee for her in the morning the exact way she liked it, black with 1 small spoon of honey, a specific thing she'd mentioned once, 2 months ago, that she had assumed no one was paying attention to. Someone was paying attention. She was being practical. She was being careful. She was failing at both. It was April when it happened. A Wednesday afternoon, which felt wrong. Important things should not happen on ordinary Wednesday afternoons. But they do. They were in his library. He had a library, a proper one, floor-to-ceiling shelves on 3 walls. And she had been reading something, and he had been working, and they'd been in that comfortable shared silence that had become one of the things she valued most about her time in this strange life. He set his laptop aside and said her name. She looked up. He was watching her with that expression. The open one, the one that cost him something, the one he only wore when he decided to stop protecting himself. I need to tell you something, he said. She put the book down. When David first brought me your father's file, he said, I didn't act on it immediately. I sat with it for 3 weeks. I read everything. Your father's financial history, your employment history, Marcus's school records. He paused. Your high school newspaper articles. She stared at him. You wrote one about a teacher who was falsifying grade records for athletes, he said. You were 17. You published it knowing it would make powerful people in your community angry. It was the best piece of actual investigative journalism I had read in years. Not in terms of sophistication, but in terms of courage. You saw something wrong and you said so in public with your name on it. He stopped. That's when I decided. You chose me specifically. Yes. You read everything about me and you chose me. Yes. She absorbed this. It landed somewhere complicated. Not violation exactly, because nothing he'd accessed was private in the legal sense, but something adjacent. The way to being truly seen before you even knew someone was looking. That, she started, unsettling. I know. I'm not sure how to apologize for it except to tell you the truth. which is that whatever I thought I was looking for when I went through that file, the version of you I constructed from documents, was nothing like who you actually are. You're more than that. You're more than I expected in every way that matters. He held her gaze. And I'm telling you this now because I think you should know, because you deserve to know before... He stopped. She waited. Before what? She said. Before I say that I don't want you to leave in October. The room was very quiet. Ashton, I know what the contract says. I know what we agreed. I know that you have a life in Ohio, a family, things I have no right to ask you to set aside. I'm not asking you to decide anything right now. He exhaled, I'm just telling you the truth, because that was what you asked me for at the beginning. And something moved across his face. I've been finding it very difficult to be honest about this in particular. She looked at him for a long time. She thought about Ohio, about Maywood, about Marcus and her father, and the diner on Route 9, and the single pair of good shoes, about the life she had been building toward since she was 16, that life that was always after. She thought about a parking garage in White Plains and the sound of her own laugh. She thought about what it meant to be seen, really seen, by someone you'd also really seen. I have 7 months left on the contract, she said. Yes, and after that, nothing is decided. Nothing is decided. She nodded slowly. Okay, he repeated, like a man who had been holding his breath for a long time and found out he was allowed to breathe. They went back to their respective things, her book, his laptop, and the room was the same and also entirely different. The way rooms are when something important has just happened in them. May, June. The city changed the way New York changes. Suddenly fully, almost aggressively green and bright and warm. They were something. She couldn't name it precisely. They hadn't named it. By some unspoken agreement, they had decided that the naming could wait, that what they were building was more important than the label, that they had time. They were wrong about the time. It was a Friday evening in June when Priya came to find Clara with a look that Clara had never seen on her face before. Priya's face was managed with the same precision as everything else about her. That was why the look was so alarming. It was unmanaged. Something had gotten past the defenses. There's something you need to see, Priya said. It was an article, not financial press this time. A gossip site, the kind of site that Clara had never had any reason to think about, the kind that tracked the movements of wealthy and notable people with the zeal of a naturalist studying rare species. The headline was, Ashton Cole's Mystery Woman. Who is the Ohio girl in the penthouse? The article was long. The research was, Clara thought distantly, actually quite thorough, in the way that the worst things often are. It had her name, her hometown, her employment history. It had the broad strokes, debt, contract. Indentured was a word the article used, a word that arrived like a slap, and it had photographs. Clear ones. Her and Ashton at 3 different events. The Christmas party. New Year's Eve on the roof. The moment just after midnight. The moment where he had been looking at her while she looked at the city. That photograph. Someone had been on that roof with a long lens. The comments below the article were what you might expect from 1,000 strangers who had been given a story shape to produce judgment and fed it in the middle of a Friday afternoon. Clara sat down on the edge of the couch and read the whole thing twice. Priya stood nearby. Priya, who never hovered. Where's Ashton? Clara said. In his office. He's seen it. He's trying to. I'll go. He was standing at the window when she came in. The tablet was on his desk. Face up, he didn't turn around immediately. I'm sorry, he said. His voice was flat, which she'd learned meant he was genuinely upset. The more controlled the voice, the worse the feeling underneath. Who sent it in? She said. We're working on that. Okay, but who is it? Who has access to the roof that night? Who would have? We'll find out. Ashton. She waited. He turned. His face was a closed one, but not the control closed, the hurt closed. The one she'd only seen twice. This isn't your fault. I brought you into this. I signed a contract and got on a plane. Those were my choices. They used the word indentured. I know, it's a word. I'm not made of glass. He came toward her, stopped a few feet away. The comments. I've read worse on the menu specials board at the diner, she said. I'm from a small town in Ohio. People talk. I know how to not let it matter. He was looking at her with that expression, the open one, the one that cost him. How are you doing this? He said. How are you this? Because I know what's true and what isn't, she said. And I know who I am. No article changes that. He reached up and touched her face. Just once. Just a brush at her cheek. His hand dropped before it really registered. I'm going to have our legal team send a response, he said. Okay. It will name the arrangement, but characterize it accurately. Okay. It will probably generate more coverage. Ashton, she held his gaze. Do what you think is right. You usually do. Something moved through him that she could feel from across the distance. I think you should know, he said, that what was in that photograph on New Year's Eve, what that image captured. He stopped, chose the words. It was real. Whatever it looked like from the outside, it was real. She stood very still. I know, she said, very quietly. Okay, he said. Okay, she said. The legal response went out. It did generate more coverage. The coverage was, as things often are in the court of public opinion, mixed. But something happened in the days after that Clara had not expected. People who had grown up like her, people who had made a hard choice with their family and been mischaracterized for it, those people started talking. On social media, in comment sections, in places where ordinary people say ordinary true things that sometimes become a tide. The phrase she kept seeing was, she did it for her family. Stop making that a scandal. She saw that written by a woman in Alabama who had worked double shifts for 11 years to keep her mother's house. By a man in Houston who had moved his whole family across the country for a job that wasn't what he'd expected, so his kids could go to better schools. By a girl who was 19 and working 3 jobs and posted 2 lines. She's not indentured. She's a daughter. Respect that. Clara sat alone in the penthouse on a Thursday night and read all of these and cried. Not the bathroom kind, not the private kind. The proper kind. The kind that means something real is moving through you and deserves to be felt. When Ashton came in and found her, he sat down on the couch beside her, not at the chair cross, not at a careful distance, but beside her, and didn't ask what was wrong, because he could see what it was. He just stayed. He was good at staying. She thought that was one of the underrated great qualities in person, not the dramatic showing up, but the unglamorous, faithful staying. They sat there for a while. Then she said, "Tell me about the photograph on your desk." Long pause. "You know about that." "I've known for months. I've been waiting for you to tell me." He looked at his hands. "It's my mother," he said, "before she got sick. When I was about 8, we were on a beach in Maine. She's laughing at something. I can't remember what. I turn it down, because sometimes looking at it makes it hard to work. But I can't put away." "When did you lose her?" "She's still alive. She's just..." He was quiet. "She's been in a facility for the last 4 years. She doesn't always know who I am anymore." Clara reached over and took his hand. She just held it. She didn't say anything because sometimes there is nothing to say and a person needs to know that another person is there in the silence with them, that the silence doesn't mean they're alone in it. He held her hand back. July was theirs. That was how Clara would always think about it later. July was theirs. The city heat, the long evenings, the particular ease that had grown between them, past guardedness, past performance, down to the actual people they were. She made him watch movies he'd never seen. Classic ones, black and white ones, the kind she and her mother had watched on their old TV. He made her try food she'd never had. They argued about things that mattered, ethics, money, what a life well lived required, and things that didn't matter at all, but were satisfying to argue about anyway. He started showing her things he'd never shown anyone. The notebooks where he sketched out ideas at 2 in the morning, the half-finished novel on his laptop. He was embarrassed about it. She thought it was genuinely good. The fact that he sang under his breath while he was reading and was completely unaware of it. She loved him. She knew it and didn't say it and didn't need to yet. He loved her. She knew this too, in the way that does not require words, in the way it shows up in 1,000 small daily choices made by someone who has decided that your comfort and your joy are things they want to be responsible for. Neither of them said it. Not yet. It was July, and they had 3 months, and things that are real can afford to wait. Then August came, and with August came Garrett, the former CFO, the man who had stolen $12 million and shattered Ashton's capacity for trust. He had been arrested, tried, and sentenced to 4 years, which he had served 2 of, after which he had apparently been released on appeal based on procedural error in the original prosecution. Clara found this out from Priya on an August morning that was too hot and too bright. Ashton knows, she said, since yesterday. Priya said, he didn't sleep. She found him in the library. He had clearly been there all night. There was a coffee cup of the dried ring of 7 hours ago, a blanket half pushed off the couch, 3 books face down at various points around the room like dropped conversations. He looked up when she came in. He looked like himself, and also like someone who had been working very hard for several hours to look like himself. I'm okay, he said. I know, she said. I didn't say you weren't. She sat down across from him. Tell me what you're thinking, she said. I'm thinking that a man I trusted did something that I haven't fully recovered from, and now he's free, and I have no idea what that means going forward. Whether he makes noise, whether he comes after the company publicly, whether, he stopped, whether I'm about to have to go through it all again. And if you do, then I do. Ashton. She leaned forward. 3 months ago, you stood in front of a room full of people and said that your company had done something wrong, and here is how we're going to fix it. That is not the behavior of a man who is undone by someone else's choices. That is the behavior of a man who knows exactly who he is. He looked at her. You're allowed to be shaken by this, she said. You're also allowed to remember what you're made of. Long silence. I don't know what I'd do without you, he said. She looked at him. He looked back. I know what I'm about to say, he said. And I know the timing is... I know we said we weren't going to... Say it anyway. He exhaled. I love you. There it was. 3 words mid-August. In a library with a dried coffee ring and 3 face-down books. No fireworks, no perfect setting, no choreography. Just a man sitting on a couch who had decided to stop carrying it alone. She looked at him for a long time. I know, she said, not to be difficult, not to withhold, because it was the truest thing she had, and she was a person who valued truth above almost everything. And what she was true about right now was that she had known it and lived inside the knowledge of it for weeks, and it felt different hearing it said. It felt like something in her chest unlocking. I know. I love you too. He got up and came to her and sat beside her on the couch. Close this time, no careful distance. And she put her head against his shoulder, and they sat in a hot August morning with the city going about its business below them, and the whole rest of their lives sitting in a room like a guest who had arrived early and was being wonderfully patient. September. It was always going to be September. The story was always going to save its hardest thing for the end. Clara's phone rang at 4 a.m. on a Tuesday in the second week of September. The number was her father's house. Her stomach had the answer before her brain did. George Mills had a cardiac event at 10:30 the previous evening. He was in the hospital. The treatment was helping, but the event had been significant. He was stable. The nurse told her carefully, but stable covered a lot of ground. She was on a plane to Ohio by 6 a.m. Not Ashton's jet. She didn't want to wait for it to be prepared. She couldn't wait for anything. She needed to go now. Commercial flight, first available. She sat in a middle seat between a businessman and a grandmother with a crossword puzzle, and she held herself together all the way to Columbus. Ashton called as she landed. She answered. How bad, was the first thing he said. I don't know yet. Stable, they said. I'm coming. Ashton, I'm coming. She almost argued. She had the argument ready. This is my family. I can handle this. We don't need to make this into a scene. She had the argument ready, and what came out instead was, okay. Her father looked smaller in the hospital bed. That was the first thing. The particular way illness subtracts from a person, pulls something out of their size. He was conscious and aware, and his eyes were wet when she came through the door. She held his hand. She said all the things. She was there. Marcus arrived from school with his overnight bag and his math textbook because he didn't know what else to bring, and that broke her heart open in a way that almost nothing else could. Ashton arrived that evening. He drove a rental car from the airport which he thought about later, that he had rented a car, that he had driven it himself, that he had come to a small town in Ohio without a driver or an advance team or any of the apparatus of his life. He knocked on the door of the hospital room, and her father looked at him, at this man who had purchased his debt in his daughter's year, and arrived in a regular car from an airport, and George Mills looked at Clara, and something passed between them that was too complicated and too loving for any other words. "Sir," Ashton said, "I'm Ashton. I wanted to see how you were doing." George Mills studied him for a long moment. Then he looked at Clara again with that father look, the one that says, "I see what's here, and I have an opinion about it that I'm choosing, right now, to keep to myself." "I'm better," George said, "now that she's here." Ashton stayed 2 days. He slept on a cot in a hospital waiting room and ate vending machine coffee and helped Marcus with chest problems in the family waiting area. He did not try to fix anything or manage anything or make his presence felt as anything other than a person who wanted to be where Clara was. Clara watched him. She couldn't stop watching him. This man with $41 billion in a city that bowed toward him, on a cot in an Ohio hospital, patient and quiet and present in the way she had thought about back in July, when she understood what she felt. On the second night, Marcus found her in the hallway. "I like him," Marcus said, with a directness that was entirely his own and had nothing to do with being 12. "I know," she said. "He beat me at chess twice and let me beat him once," Marcus said. "But I noticed." "Did you?" "Yeah, but it was still nice." He considered. "Clara, are you going to stay?" She looked at her brother. This boy, this small, serious, extraordinary person. "I don't know yet," she said honestly. "But you want to?" She was quiet. "Mom used to say," Marcus said slowly, "that Ohio wasn't the whole world. She said it all the time. I used to think she meant we should go somewhere. But I think," he scrunched his face the way he did when he was working something out, "I think she might have meant it was okay to be somewhere else. You know, like it was okay to go." Clara's eyes were very full. "When did you get this smart?" she said. "I've always been this smart," Marcus said. "You were just busy." She laughed. She cried. She hugged her brother in the fluorescent-lit hallway of a hospital in Ohio at 11 at night, while their father slept and the man she loved played solitaire on his phone around the corner. Ashton flew back to New York the next morning. Her father was improving. She stayed 3 more days until he was discharged and settled at home with his medication schedule, and his neighbor Mrs. Pierce checked in and Marcus's routine restored. Before she left, her father took her hand. "He loves you," George Mills said. "Dad, I'm a man who made the worst mistake of his life, and I have to live with it. I know that, and I can see things clearly now that I paid too much to learn to see." He held her hand tighter. He came to an Ohio hospital on a cot. Rich men don't do that unless it means something. She couldn't speak for a moment. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," he said. "I just want you to know, whatever you decide, wherever you go, you have my blessing. You've always had it. I just never said so in a way that cost me anything." She pressed his hand to her cheek. "I love you, Dad. I love you, Clara Bug." The childhood name. He hadn't used it in years. It undid her completely. She went back to New York in October. The contract technically ended on October 14th. October 13th was a Thursday. They had dinner at the Kitchen Island. Chinese takeout, their usual. The city below them was doing its October thing. That particular New York fall evening light that turns everything amber and looks like memory even while it's happening. Neither of them said anything about the date. After dinner, she sat on the couch and he sat beside her and she said, "I'm not going." He turned to look at her. "Not because of the contract," she said. "Because I don't want to. Because this is where I want to be. That's it. That's the reason." He was quiet for a moment. "Your father," he said, "is getting better and has a good doctor and a neighbor and a son who is possibly the most capable 12-year-old in America. Ohio is a place I can visit. I own a car, unlike some people I know." Something moved through him that she could see from the outside, a release of something long held. His shoulders dropped a fraction. His face opened. "Okay," he said, for the 3rd time. "The right time." "Okay," she said. He reached over and took her hand. She leaned against him. Outside the window, New York was doing what it always does, being enormous and indifferent and blindingly alive, this city that never stopped for anyone. She looked at it and thought about her mother wanting to fly and never getting the chance. She thought about Ohio and the diner and Marcus's chest and her father's rooster on the wall and the one good pair of shoes that had carried her here. She thought about a Tuesday in October when she picked up a pen and signed a paper in the kitchen in Maywood and thought she was giving something up. She hadn't known. She could not have known. But this is where most stories end, and this one doesn't. Because 2 weeks later, in November, the other thing happened. The thing that changed everything again. Not in a small way. In the enormous, irrevocable way that life reserves for the moments when you have just barely caught your breath. It was a Sunday morning, and Clara found an envelope, not a digital message, not a text, a physical envelope, slid under her door at some point between when she went to sleep and when she woke up. Her name on it, in handwriting she didn't recognize. Inside was a single page, printed, no signature. She read it once. She set it down. She picked it up and read it again. Then she sat on the edge of her bed with the page in her hands and looked at the city and thought very carefully about what she knew to be true and what she had been told and whether those two things were the same. The page said, "The contract was never about honesty. Ask him about the Maywood Development Project. Ask him what Aurelius Holdings planned to buy next." She sat with it for a long time. Then she got up and went to the library and found the shelf where Ashton kept his business reading. Annual reports, acquisition files, the physical documentation. He preferred the things he was actively working on. She found a folder labeled Maywood Regional Development, 2023 to 2024. She sat down on the library floor and opened it. The folder was thick, 50 pages. She read every one. Aurelius Holdings had been in preliminary discussions with a development firm about a residential and commercial redevelopment project in Maywood, Ohio. The project would require acquisition of a significant block of properties in the town center. Properties that could be acquired below market value if the owners were in financial distress. The Mills hardware property was on the list. She sat on the floor of the library with this folder in her lap and felt the world reassemble itself around a different center. He had known about her before David came to the house. He had known about the hardware store not because of the debt portfolio, but because of the development project, the contract, the arrangement, the entire year. Had it been a way to keep her close while the project moved forward? Had it been a way to keep the family manageable, compliant, away from lawyers or attention? Had any of it been what he said it was? She heard him come into the library behind her. She didn't turn around. Clara. She held up the folder without looking at him. Silence. "What is this?" she said. Another silence. The wrong kind. "Sit down," he said. "Please, let me explain. I'm sitting." She gestured at the floor. "I've been sitting here for 20 minutes trying to explain it to myself. I'd like to see how your version compares." He came around the couch and sat on the floor in front of her, not on the couch above her. The floor. She noticed that. "The development project was real," he said. "The preliminary discussions happened. Your father's property was on the initial list. That is true. When did you know about it in relation to when David came to your house?" "The development file came across my desk approximately a month before." She looked at him. "I need to know," she said, "whether any part of what you told me, the Garrett story, needing someone honest, all of it, was a cover for getting close to a family whose property you were planning to acquire." He held her gaze. "No. How do I?" "You can't verify it," he said. "That is the truth of it. I cannot give you documentation of my intentions. I can only tell you what they were. The development project and the debt acquisition were handled by separate divisions. They came to my desk at different times. When I saw your father's case in the clause, and I read your journalism piece, the development project was not on my mind. That is true. I swear to you that is true." "Someone slid a note under my door," she said. Something moved through his face. Controlled. Immediate. "What did it say?" "Asked about the Maywood Development Project." "That's what it said." He was quiet. "Who knows about it?" she said. The development discussions were internal, limited to the project team, and a few board members. He stopped. Harrison Wolf, he said slowly. She remembered the gala in October. The way Harrison Wolf had kept maneuvering conversations back to Charleston. The way she told Ashton, and Ashton had pulled out of the Charleston deal. He's on the Maywood project team, Ashton said. The words were coming slowly. I pulled out of his Charleston project last year based on your observation. He's been looking for leverage since then. He would know about Maywood. He would know about you. He would know that this would. He stopped. Destabilize things, she said. Yes. She looked at him. So what do I do? She said. With the fact that the note might be manipulation, and also might be true, with the fact that the two things aren't mutually exclusive. You ask me anything you want to know, he said, and I answer you, right now, on the floor, without lawyers or PR or protection of any kind. Whatever you want to know. She asked, an hour of questions. He answered everyone. He was not perfect. There were things about the development project he had signed off on without adequate attention. There were things about the debt acquisition division he had allowed to operate too independently. He said so. He did not hedge. He did not protect himself. She listened. At the end of it, she said, what happened to the Maywood project? It was shelved. In March, when the article came out, when I restructured the acquisition ethics practices, before or after I signed the contract, the development project was shelved in March. You signed in October of the previous year. He was steady. I don't expect you to take that on faith. I expect you to ask Priya to pull the archive project files and verify the timestamp on the shelving documentation. She was quiet for a moment. I'll do that, she said. I know. She got up off the floor. He got up too. I need a day, she said. I need to think. Take what you need. She walked to the guest suite, her old suite, not their suite, the original room, and closed the door and sat on the edge of the bed and thought. She thought about what she knew to be true. She thought about the parking garage in White Plains and his laugh. She thought about him on a cot in an Ohio hospital. She thought about the turned-down photograph. She thought about every moment in 11 months where she had looked at him and seen something that could not be manufactured. She thought about the things she couldn't explain away and the things she could. She called Marcus. Talk to me, she said. About what? About what Mom used to say when something was really hard and you didn't know what to do. Marcus was quiet for a moment. She used to say, when you can't see the path, stand still and look at what's true, not what's scary. What's true? What's true? True. The development project existed. True. His explanations were consistent and verifiable. True. Harrison Wolf had motive and access. True. The note was anonymous. True. She had spent 11 months learning to read a person, and she had not once, in all that time, seen him be the kind of man this note suggested he was. True. He had sat on the floor. She came out of the room in the evening. He was in the living room, standing at the window in the dark, the city bright below. She came to stand beside him. I looked at what's true, she said. He turned. The development project is a problem we need to address properly, she said. Full transparency, proper ethical review, a decision about what Aurelius Holdings does with those properties that doesn't hurt anyone in that town. That's not negotiable. Agreed. Harrison Wolf. Will be handled through appropriate channels. I want to be in the room. Yes. She looked at him. I believe you, she said. That is also true. I want you to know I arrived at it. I didn't just decide because I wanted it to be true. I actually looked at all of it, and I believe you. He exhaled. I know, he said. I know you did. That's the only way it means anything. She took his hand. They stood at the window for a long time, this woman from Ohio, and this young man who owned pieces of the sky, looking at the enormous, complicated, alive world below them. She thought, this is what I signed up for when I signed that paper in my father's kitchen. Not this specifically. Not him. But this, the kind of life that is not simple, not clean, not free of difficulty, but is genuinely alive, is genuinely hers. She thought about her mother, who had wanted to fly. She was flying. The months that followed were not perfect. Real things never are. There was a Harrison Wolf situation, which resolved after considerable legal process and board-level consequences, in his removal from the board, and which cost Ashton a professional relationship of 8 years and cost Clara several weeks of press attention she would have preferred to avoid. There was the Maywood development decision, which Ashton made publicly, announcing that Aurelius Holdings was converting its position in the proposed project to a small business revitalization fund for the Maywood Town Center, converting would-be acquisitions to low-interest business loans, and partnering with local government to protect the character of the commercial district. Her father called when he read about it. He cried. She didn't tell him to stop. There was Marcus visiting at Christmas, his first time in New York, his first time anywhere really. The 12-year-old who had decided not to cry on the porch standing at the window of the penthouse with his mouth open, looking at all of it. There was Marcus playing chess with Ashton for 4 hours on Christmas morning, losing 6 times, winning twice, and the pure, uncomplicated joy on his face that Clara kept as a photograph in her heart. There was Renata's saying, when Clara told her she was staying, simply, "I knew that dress would work." There was Priya, who communicated primarily in bullet points, saying one afternoon with entirely uncharacteristic brevity, "You're good for him, for what it's worth," then returning immediately to her bullet points. There was Simone, who had brunch with Clara in March at a small place near the park, and said, "I'm glad it's you," and meant it entirely, and they talked for 3 hours, and afterward felt like something had been properly placed in the world. There was a morning in April when Clara was at the kitchen counter with her coffee, black, 1 small spoon of honey, and Ashton was making terrible eggs, which he had not improved at despite her efforts, and she was reading something on her tablet, and he was singing under his breath without knowing it, that old habit, and the light was coming the way morning light does in April in New York, gold and soft and slightly unreal. She looked up. He looked over. He was still singing. He hadn't noticed. She smiled. He saw the smile, then registered what he was doing, and looked appropriately embarrassed, and she laughed, and the sound filled the apartment the way sounds do when they finally found a space they fit. "What are you singing?" she said. He listened to himself for a moment. "I have no idea," he said. "It's nice." He smiled. The full one, the one that had taken 5 months to earn, and that she still thought was one of the most valuable things she'd been given in this extraordinary, complicated, improbable year. Here is what Clara Mills knew at 24, on an April morning in a New York penthouse that had slowly and irreversibly become home. She knew that love is not the opposite of loss. It lives next to loss. It is made more real by it. Her mother never flew. Her father made a desperate choice. She stood in a kitchen in Ohio with a pen in her hand and said yes to a year. She couldn't see the end of, and look where the end was. She knew that trust is not a thing you give once. It's a practice, a daily choice. You look at the person. You look at what's true. You choose again. She knew that being sold, being seen as a thing that can be transacted, does not make you a thing. You are never what someone else's desperation reduces you to. You are who you are in spite of and because of, and through everything they throw at you. She knew that the world's youngest billionaire was also just a man who turned a photograph face down and didn't know he was singing and needed someone to sit on the floor with him in a library and ask hard questions and stay. She knew that Ohio would always be home the way the first place is always home, held in the body, carried in particular sound of your name and your father's voice. And she knew the way you know things that have been tested and found real, that what started with pen and a piece of paper in a kitchen on a Tuesday in October was something that no contract could fully hold and no ending could reduce. She had gone to pay a debt. She had not expected to become someone's home. She had not expected him to become hers. But there she was. There they were. Coffee and April light and terrible eggs, and a man singing a song he didn't know the name of. There they were. For George Mills, who loved his daughter too much and too poorly, and found his way back to her. For Marcus, who always knew. For every woman who picked up a pen because there was no other choice, and found out that the story wasn't over. It was just beginning.